The first thing I would say is just take 15 minutes. I know it might feel like it's too much to take an hour or a half a day or a day. Just take 15 minutes at the top of your day, every single day, to do something for yourself. And I say the top of the day because the day gets away from you. It gets too busy and you're not going to find time. So you do it in the beginning. I call it kind of tithing that first 10-15% of the day to ourselves.
Hello and welcome to the Stroke It podcast. I'm Jenny Townsend, your host. Thank you for joining me. I'm so excited for you to be inspired to live your life fully, to take ownership of your time, your schedule, and your life, but most importantly, learn and grow and develop personally and professionally. Myself and others are going to share life lessons that we've learned through leadership, through heartache, through pain, through struggles, and we'll be sharing some success stories with you as well. Super eager for you to dive in, learn, and grow. And once again, just take ownership of your life today. Hello and welcome to the Stroke It Guide podcast. Jenny Townsend, your host. Today you are in for a treat. So you're going to want to tune in, turn the volume up, get rid of any distractions because Dr. Zoe is really going to provide a lot of great insight and tools. We're going to be talking about ourselves. We're going to be talking about shame. We're going to be talking about going all in with our partners, navigating balance, and really the whole thing is really about relationships, which is my entire concepts. I'm really excited to have her with me today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before I turn the mic over. So Dr. Zoe is a licensed psychotherapist, speaker, podcast host, relationship coach, and fitness fanatic. She is passionate about helping women who struggle in difficult relationships, especially that sometimes difficult relationships themselves, overcome complex shame and codependency. After 15 years in a traditional psychotherapy practice, she jumped off the couch and now helps women for using a very different modality with a mixture of virtual therapy, coaching services, and programs through a lens of psychology, faith, and a dash of feminism. Zoe, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I'm so excited to be here, and I just love what you do.
Well, thank you. And I know that you're going to tell everyone a little bit more about you. So before we get started with the grit and the grace of this podcast, I really want you to share with our listeners, what season of life are you in? Where do you live? And what inspired you to do the work that you're doing today?
Oh my goodness. Such a great question because the season where we're in makes a huge difference. It's the backdrop for everything. And a lot of times we get stuck in ruts, not realizing that they're not right for the season that we're in right now. So I'm in an interesting season. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for a couple of decades, but my nest is emptying. So I have 5 children all together. My youngest, who is 12, she and I are the only ones here in my home now. And so it is a very different season than it was when I was in the busy, season of raising multiple children and homeschooling and working. And so I'm in a quieter season, which is really, really nice. But I'm also in a very busy season in my work life. I'm an entrepreneur, of course. I'm a speaker. I'm a podcast host. I am a psychotherapist, and I have a private practice, and I'm also a writer. And so I am in the middle of writing I'm editing my second book, writing my third book. And so in addition to all of my other work, I'm writing as well, which I love. It's just beautiful to be able to do the things that you love in your life. The journey. So how did I get to this place of talking about complex shame? My journey is very interesting. I grew up a little Black girl in an all-white farming community town in Maryland and developed some identity issues as a result of that, and what I would call kind of some basic identity shame issues. I grew up in a fundamental Christian home, and I became pregnant when I was 15. My dad was a prominent doctor in the community. In addition, with our fundamental faith background, that was just not going to happen in my family. And so my parents sent me away to a crisis, not a crisis, but a pregnancy home with the understanding that I would place my daughter for adoption, which I did. And I came back home to pretend like nothing ever happened. And I learned to hide then and that time in my life. And, I also learned that achievement is a really great distractor from whatever else is going on inside. And so I was an athlete. I got a scholarship to UCLA, became a track star, and also then academically did very well, got my, undergrad, my master's, my doctorate, went on and learned to just hide really and push my shame down. And eventually, when I had my third child, my daughter, who was my first kept daughter, she was born with a very rare genetic disorder. And it was really where I call that meeting point where my shame really kind of bumped up against my life that I had curated so well, and things just started to fall apart. I believe that I was being punished for placing my first daughter for adoption. Fast forward, I started to do my own work on myself, and I learned how to own my story. I learned how to speak my shame. I reunited with my daughter, who I'd placed with it for adoption 18 years now. Then at that point, and I started my own journey of really understanding for myself and my clients this type of shame that I had been experiencing. And it's a very different type of shame from what Brene Brown talks about, the type of shame where you can talk about it and empathy and compassion from other people just kind of obliterates it. And I was trying to understand why that wasn't working for me. And so in my work and my research and my writing and my practice, I came to understand this different type of shame and how to help. I help myself and my clients untangle it. And it really just began a journey for me of helping women who are in difficult relationships overcome complex shame, overcome codependency so that they can essentially just live a life of freedom and experience healthy love.
That
A
is
long
absolutely,
story.
you know what? I'm so glad that you shared all that. And I am so impressed by you. And I want to say thank you for being here and sharing all of that. And I just love your story already. I want to go, so you reunited with your daughter
Yes, yes.
and she's part of your life?
Oh, yes, she's part of my life. We just celebrated my 50th birthday in Greece with all of my children, including my daughter who I placed for adoption and her children. And so it's just it's good. It's so good.
Wow. Wow. And
Yes.
are your parents still living?
My father is dead. Yeah, he
He is.
passed away, which was actually a little bit of the impetus for me really starting to break out of that shell of secrecy and hiding.
Do you feel like you were free after his passing?
I talk about it in my book that the answer is there was some freedom that was there that I didn't even realize I didn't have. Definitely my father's life was not a good exchange for that freedom. But yes, his passing, I think really honestly, when we lose someone who's so close to us, our entire world shifts a little bit. Our worldview shifts, the way we see life shifts. And so it's a combination of losing someone that's so important to me and also whatever the messages that I carried and held so strongly, also were released.
Yeah.
Yes,
Did he get to meet your daughter?
he did. He did.
He
He did get
did.
to meet her. Yeah,
That's
my mom and my
beautiful.
father developed a relationship with her before my father died.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful. And they felt probably in their hearts and probably stand by it that you turned out to be amazing because of the choice that they made for you, probably. Like you were able to go to
sure.
school. I mean, the fact that you got your doctorate, a lot of that may not have happened, if
That's
you would have
definitely
kept
true.
her. So there's always a silver lining.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There is always a silver lining to every story, and that's really part of in my writing, what I want to give to women, especially, is hope. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely amazing. All right, well, let's get right into what you are here to speak about today. I do want to also acknowledge that she is the author, the Ask Dr. Zoe column in Grit and Grace Project's Women's Magazine and the Book of the Year of Self-Care. So congratulations on that. We really want to celebrate you as well. So I would love to get started with the shame factor first. We're going to talk about yourself, and I want us to understand how shame shows up in our lives and how it can sabotage relationships.
Absolutely. So I think it's first important, and most people do understand that this difference, but some don't. So I'm just going to talk about it first, is the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is an emotional reaction, a feeling of remorse based on something we've done. And sometimes it's not accurate because sometimes we feel guilty, especially as women, for things that we shouldn't feel guilty about. But generally, guilt is a feeling because of something we've done. It's a feeling of remorse. And the wonderful thing about guilt is that it doesn't necessarily attach itself to our identity. It's something we've done. And so the beautiful thing is we can choose to do differently. We can go back, we can make repairs, we can apologize. And so guilt helps us. It's really an adaptive feeling that helps us kind of stay aligned with our moral code, right? The problem with shame is that shame says that we are bad, not I've done something bad or I've done something that goes against my moral code, but I as a person am bad. And when you attach that to your identity, you're kind of stuck because there's nothing you can do about that. If you are bad, then the only option you have is to hide. right? And so that's how shame shows up in our relationships is we hide. We hide the deepest parts of who we are, we hide the parts that we're ashamed of, and we show up in relationships with these facades. And then the biggest issue is that when our people love us, we don't feel loved because there's a part of us that says, but you don't really know. He doesn't really know or she doesn't really know those things that I'm hiding. And so even though they love me, I can't truly feel loved because they're not loving the me that I know. And that's the most damaging aspect of shame in relationships is the hiding and then the not being able to accept love. And when we can't accept love from somebody else, it's also harder for us to show up in the way that we need to show up in a relationship.
And love ourselves. Like, I feel like
Absolutely.
that's so hard. So, can you talk a little bit more about how to prevent this? Or maybe some people aren't even aware that they're shaming themselves or that they're living with this. They may know that they feel guilty, but I feel like some people aren't really self-aware, which then prevents them from having that self-love and care for themselves and then allowing other people in. So, can you share
Yeah.
that?
So, some ways that, or I should say, some signs that indicate that you may have some shame. Number one is if you notice you tend to hide. If you're hiding outside in public, if you're hiding inside in relationships, that's definitely an indication. If you feel like you need to hide, it's because you feel shame. The second thing is that shame is something that is put upon us. It doesn't just organically exist without some type of social interaction, if that makes sense. Even if it's looking on Instagram and comparing yourself to somebody else, that's still a social interaction in some way. And so what we have to understand is that shame comes from somewhere. And usually our shame messages come, sometimes toxic shame messages come from early on in childhood. And so what happens is that when we leave our childhood home or when we leave bad relationships, when we leave places that we can maybe recognize as not healthy for us, dysfunctional, we imagine that we're just leaving and now it's done. But what we often do is we pack up all the words that we received in that experience or in that relationship, and we take them with us and we attach them to ourselves and speak them, right? And we often don't recognize that we're doing that. But if I can ask the listener to pay attention in the next couple of days, in the next week, to what are the things you say to yourself when you're frustrated, angry, sad, all of those kind of negative emotions, what do you start to notice that you say to yourself? They're often shame messages. Now, if you find out you're not saying any shame messages, then maybe you aren't carrying so much shame. Maybe there's something else going on in terms of your self-talk. But if you notice that the things that you're saying to yourself tend to be putting yourself down, tend to be cautioning yourself to hide, tend to be reminding yourself of all of the negative things about yourself, then you're experiencing shame.
So when you talk about hiding, talk to me about different ways people hide because I'm already thinking about like some people and I'm like, oh, maybe they're hiding. So where are they hiding?
Right. So in relationships, we can hide by not expressing our true feelings through codependency, through mirroring other people's emotions instead of letting them have their own and us having our own. We can hide just real concrete things like information, all the Amazon packages that we're hiding that show up at our front door, money stuff, our history. But sometimes it's just more subtle things when it comes to true feelings, when it comes to fears, when it comes to ideas that you feel maybe shameful. Sometimes we hide our past or we gloss over it. We ignore it or make things seem like they were different than they really are. We can hide through gaslighting. We can hide through stonewalling when we're just refusing to engage with somebody in a relationship. There's plenty of ways that we can hide.
So if we notice that we're saying things that maybe speak shame and that we are, and then we notice that we're hiding, how do we get out of this? Or like, what do we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Part of it depends on whether you're dealing with a deeper shame or whether it's a surface shame. And so one of the differences is that with those deeper shames, what we found is we might have tried to express ourselves. We might have tried to be vulnerable. And when someone gave us compassion, it didn't work because we didn't believe it. We weren't able to take it in, or maybe someone gaslit us when we were trying to experience vulnerability, and that just makes our shame go deeper. So if we're looking at something like complex shame, which is a little more difficult to work with than simple shame, with simple shame, you just have to garner the strength and the courage to speak the thing about which you're shamed, and you will find that over time the shame will evaporate. With complex shame, it's a little more complicated. What you need to do with that is you need to be able to go back and look at those shame messages. You need to pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. Then what you have to do is this complex thing of untangling the shame from your identity. And part of the reason why that's hard is because when we feel shame, remember I said we hide, right? And in the hiding, we often do things to hurt ourselves because remember we're running. And we can do, like I said, really concrete things like drugs, alcohol, sex, different things to really try to hide from our shame. Or we can do things like get a bunch of degrees and, really focus on other things. But often when we're experiencing shame and we're hiding, we're hurting ourselves, we're sabotaging ourselves in some way, shape, or form. And so then that gets intertwined with an initial shame. And so what we have to do is be able to look at it and say, okay, all of these things I'm feeling shame for. Maybe some of them are my fault. Maybe some of them are not my fault. It doesn't really matter which ones are which because my brain sees them as all my fault. And so what I need to do is I need to name them one by one and I need to address them and take accountability for them in any way, shape, or form. And I need to forgive myself for everything I did and everything I did when I was running from my shame and things that I did that maybe make sense because another really important concept is that all behavior makes sense in its context. And so the choices that you made at various points in your life, it's way easy to go back to look at other people's lives in your life and go, why? Why did you do that? But if you really look at that one moment in time and all the moments in time that led up to that, it makes perfect sense why you made that decision. And when you can allow yourself to understand that all behavior makes sense in its context, you can forgive yourself for the things that you did. You can forgive yourself for how you showed up in a situation, what you might have allowed in some way, shape, or form, or what you might have instigated, and what you did to yourself. And so it's through that forgiving that we can actually start to untangle that shame from our identity and separate it from ourselves. And then we have to start the process of learning how to speak it, learning how to be vulnerable in safe places. But it's really about our own self-compassion and forgiveness. And then we've got to start a maintenance plan.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. And I have to imagine to get to that point is hard. And then to start taking ownership and then going back to the past and undoing the layers and facing it head on, it is easier to hide. It is easier to ignore it. I want to mention two things of what you're saying. So I've just joined a book club and we started listening to this present over perfection book. And a lot of times she indicates like we're always running. We're running. Like in our 20s, we were like going to college, we were partying, we were doing all these things. And then it was like, oh, we had to get a corporate job. And then it's like we're really busy climbing up the ladder, working all these hours, going into the deadlines. And then you become a mom and it's like you're running around the house, picking up everybody's stuff and running from here, running from there. And basically what we're doing is like we're like ignoring ourselves and our needs, or we're running away from something we don't want to face. And this is kind of making me think of that.
It's very much like that. When we have shame, we run, we hide. Yeah. And we can fill our lives with a million other things to try to not pay attention to that thing for which we're shamed. But when you're able to let go of shame, you're able to actually just live in the present with peace, which feels weird when you haven't had an experience of doing it for most of your life. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful freedom.
Yeah. And I want to add on to the forgiveness part too that you're talking about. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, forgiveness, it'll set you free and all this stuff. And my husband and I went through a really hard time challenge within our marriage. And before I could forgive him, I had to find forgiveness for myself. And that was really, really hard because at times you want to like point the finger, right? And you want to be like, oh, but it was like, no, I need to forgive myself. Then I'm able to find forgiveness of him. And then I could have been like pointing the fingers and not taking ownership, but I did take ownership. So I feel like owning it is so important, and finding the forgiveness and facing it can be super, super challenging. But once you get through there, like you can have an amazing relationship with yourself, with other people, and it really can be really freeing and beautiful as well. But you have to be willing to put the work in and know that it's gonna take time. Like it's really gonna take time. I think it took me about a year and a half to forgive myself, and then almost 2 years to forgive him. And then it wasn't like there was like a forgiveness party. It was like we had to start then rebuilding the relationship from the ground up. And then, you know, it took years, and, you know, this was obviously 6 or 7 years ago. And now our relationship is beautiful. So I completely, and then not shaming people. Like I had to not shame. And so anyways, there's so much that goes into that. Are you looking to enhance your relationship with yourself? If so, get the Stroke It Guide. My book is available on Amazon and on my website. Not only is my book going to help you with your personal journey with yourself, but it's also going to help you with the relationships of other stakeholders in your life. For instance, your spouse or partner, your employer, your employees, your friends, or your family members. And of course, because the title, there is a chapter for your pleasure, which is the last one, in the bedroom. The book offers lots of great tools and resources. There's a lot of great downloads, and it features many of my podcast guests, and they have thousands of downloads and resources that are worth a lot of money. So you're going to want to get my book today. You can buy that on Amazon or on my website, and you can change and take ownership of your life today with one simple click. There is so much benefit and beautifulness that can come from being free from that shame as well.
There is. And you're right. It takes time and it takes effort, and it's well worth the effort. Part of the thing, like you said, is accountability. And I should say one reason why it's really hard for people to take accountability of their shame is because often we're shamed for things that happen to us as well. And there's this idea that we don't want to victim blame anybody, right? And so if you're taking accountability for something that happened to you, for a way that you were victimized, it doesn't feel right. And other people will tell you, oh, it's not your fault. But that little part of you that knows the things that you've attached to it say that it is your fault. And so it feels victim blaming to take accountability for your own victimization. But it's the way that our brain works. And when you can take accountability and forgive yourself for any part that you even imagine you have in it, then you're able to work towards freedom. And that word forgiveness, a lot of people have issues with it. It's hard, and what does that mean? And I don't want to forgive somebody. And we have all these cliched sayings about forgiveness. And I'm going to give another cliched saying about forgiveness, but I think that it's beautiful because I think that it can be helpful. And it's not my quote. I'm trying to remember who said it. I'm forgetting right now who said it, but the quote is that forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. And the reason why I think that's beautiful is because we are detaching it from anybody, right? It's just what happened. It's just what I did or they did or whatever. It's what happened. And when you are able to forgive, you're finally releasing yourself of a hope that your past could have been different. And sometimes it's easier for people to attach themselves to that than to feel like they're giving something to somebody who they may have felt wronged them. But that's what we have to do.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people think that forgiveness is about the other person when it's really
Right.
about you. Like at the end of the day, when it came for me, like forgiving myself, like I was forgiving
Mhm.
myself for me. I was forgiving him for my own good. I just didn't
Yeah.
want to live with that
Exactly.
for the rest of my life. So I think that's where it can be confusing. So the shame, I want to talk a little bit more about the shaming. So the shaming is, because I'm thinking about a couple of people right now that I know that are dealing with shame, but then they're also guilt. I know that I have shamed other people as well, which I know you mentioned Brene Brown, and I was like, oh my God, like, why do I have to point this out? Why do you think that we shame people so much?
So that's an excellent question. First of all, people who are dealing with their own shame, especially really toxic shame, the way that people deal with toxic shame is to externalize it. And the way we externalize it is to put it on other people. So it makes us feel better. It's how people deal with their own shame, is to get it off of themselves and onto somebody else. That's one reason. And that's the most toxic. And well, it's not even necessarily the most toxic, because there's some really toxic shaming practices that we have in society. And the reality is that historically, shaming could keep people alive. And so if you did something that went against the moral code or somehow wasn't in line with the community, you could be ostracized, right? And that idea of being ostracized is like the extreme version of shame. And so when we shame people, we keep them in line. At least we think we do.
Right.
So we do it as a societal action to keep people in line, to keep them following rules and doing things that we think are right. Here's the thing. Research has actually shown, especially in faith-based communities, that shaming actually does not change behavior. All it does is make behavior go underground. All it does is make people hide behavior. But that's why people do it. They do it for two reasons: to externalize their own shame, and they also do it to try to bring people into line. And it's just not healthy, and we don't recognize it. And we think that it's good for somebody to shame them. That way they won't do that thing again. It doesn't work like that.
I know, and so many of us shame our family members.
Yeah, moms shame kids all the time. I'm even guilty of that, of course.
Yeah, I own a child-based business, and I see the shame, and I'm like,
yes.
like that's why we don't actually have a lot of the families come into the lessons, because it's like parents are so quick to judge and to shame, or like that's not good enough and things like that. I'm like, oh, like you're just killing them, or
moms
there's
shame other moms.
You know, they do. They really, really shame other moms as well. And I'm so guilty of shaming even some of my team members because I wanted
Hmm.
them to do certain things. And it was
Right.
like, I had these expectations and they didn't care about my expectations. Like, why do you have to say this?
Hmm.
So how do we take this shame mentality or this thought that we want to put someone in their place or keep them on track or give them our opinion? Like, how do we shut that down?
Yeah. I think the first step is recognizing that it's not effective. So you believe it is and you think it is and you've been taught it is, and so you repeat it. It's not effective. And so if you can tell yourself before you think about shaming somebody, this actually won't work. Let me try something that's going to be more effective. And what's more effective is encouragement, is constructive criticism that does not come with a shaming bend, right? Is giving somebody else an idea that you believe in them and showing them how to do something. Those are things that actually lifting people up and building people up actually works. There's nothing wrong with criticizing, but we can criticize in such a way that it is not shaming. And what that means is that we talk about behavior. We're not talking about the person and who they are as people. That makes sense.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I had to, my sister, I struggle with her, and she's the youngest, and she has two
Mm-hmm.
kids, and her life decisions, and just
Mm-hmm.
things. And I would always ask a question I knew the answer to. I
Mm-hmm.
knew the answer. Like,
Yeah.
why did I have to ask that question? Because
Ah,
it was like a dig. And,
big. Yep.
a part of me was like, just wake up. But I was pushing her away, and I was probably
Yeah.
making her hide, hide the things that she was doing, not sharing. And I
Distance
was
herself
making
from
her
you.
go down instead of really encouraging her. So now I have this whole like thought process: encourage, not discourage. Be
Yeah.
careful with your words. So anyways, okay. So I want to move on to the next topic, which is I'm talking about relationships and how women can become so busy that they don't have work-life balance and basically they lose sight of the relationships they have. So I really want you to talk about this all in concept that can transform our relationships.
Yeah. I'm a busy woman. I've been a busy woman for decades at this point, and it's even harder when you work from home. That work-life balance just shrinks, and it's so hard to find that balance. But what I find, especially for women, is we're doing too much. We're doing everything. We are trying to show up for all the people in our lives in all the ways, and it's very easy to put our relationship on the back burner. Even though we're not acknowledging and admitting necessarily that we're doing it, it's easy because your partner is technically an adult and should be able to kind of handle, his own thing. And what we don't realize, and what I know women have heard before, but until you get to that place, it's hard to kind of really pay attention to the reality that your partner needs to be first. And the reason why is because that partner is going to be there long after the kids go. And it's hard to imagine a day if your kids are young when they're going to be gone, but it happens in a millisecond. And then you're left with a core relationship in your life with someone you don't really know. And ultimately, relationships, we know for our health, are way more important than anything else. When we look at mortality, when we look at illness, what we know is those with healthy, intact relationships are healthier and live longer. So that's the reason why we need to invest. It's also understandable why it's harder because the little ones are more needy. They can't do things, obviously, that your partner can do. But I think the hope is that it doesn't take as much as we imagine when we get consistent about investing in our relationship on a daily basis. What happens though is that we neglect, and both partners do this. And then you've got this whole overhaul and all this time and energy and investment that needs to be put back into a relationship. If we had been doing the regular maintenance, it just wouldn't take that much time.
I 100% agree with you. I think sometimes, well, I don't think, I know this, a lot of people get married and then they have children and then the relationship becomes second. And then if they
Absolutely.
have three, four, and then they've got like 20 years of kids,
Yes.
those parents become separated. And then a lot of times then they're like, oh my God, we just got to get these kids out of the house so we can get divorced, which is
Yeah.
so sad. So they live all those years so unhappy, basically ignoring each other, catering to the needs. And it's like, at the end of the day, they gave up their entire marriage to have the kids when actuality, if they would have kept their marriage as the priority, they could have the marriage and the
And the
kids.
kids.
And
Yes.
so I would really like for you to kind of dive into that and inspire anyone that's listening that's maybe struggling in a relationship or marriage or trying to balance the children because, everyone's like, oh, men are so needy or women are so needy. We need our partners
We
and
do.
my husband and I, we had a conversation. This was like years before the debacle. And I remember saying to him, I don't need you.
Mm.
He was like, but it feels good to be needed. And at that point, I didn't understand what he was saying. I was just like, I'm independent. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do my things. Like, I don't financially need you. And, you know, it's nice to have your love, but like, I'm cool. Like, I'm just, you know, I didn't really need much or want much, really. I was pretty easygoing back then. Now I
Yeah.
need a lot. That need. But yeah, I would really like just like for you to speak to the listeners is how to, you know, get the relationship as the priority, because that can be challenging.
Well, I want to speak to that concept of I don't need you because I'm glad that you brought that up. You know, what I tell my partner is that I don't need you for all of those external things, right? But it's wonderful that I need you. Like, I need you for who you are. I don't need you for those other things. And to me, that's even more beautiful, right? That's why I'm here and that's why you're here, because I desperately need you. So here's my best advice is that if your relationship is in a place where you're like, that train has already passed, we're like just, you know, strangers passing by. As long as both of you guys are there in the home, there's still hope. There's still hope. And what I prescribe to all of my couples is what I call a weekly business meeting and a weekly date night. And the reason why this is so important is because we need the business meeting. We need to talk about the money and finances and kids and and calendar and all the things that we need to talk about. But number one, we need to make sure we're talking about them, and we need to prescribe time to talk about them, because when we prescribe a time to talk about them, they don't feel like intrusions on our daily life. It doesn't feel like we're just like needling at each other about the little things that we have to. But on our date nights, we have to make a rule that we don't talk about any family business, zero. And that can be really hard to show up on a date night with a man that really all you guys have been talking about for the past 15 years is just a necessary family business. And you cannot talk about any family business. And here's what I'm going to say. If it's been a while, it's going to be awkward and it's going to be weird and it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to make you believe that there's nothing left in your marriage. It might make you feel worse. But if you dedicate to it and you ask your partner to dedicate to doing this weekly, what you will find is that over time you start to rediscover each other. And it doesn't take long. It takes maybe a couple of hours once a week. It doesn't have to be a big date. You guys can take a walk. You need to do something where you're committed once a week to having a date night where you only talk to each other about your relationship and yourself and your love and your connection. The other thing that I like to prescribe to couples, and once again, these things don't take that much time. Your business meeting could be a half hour. It doesn't have to be that much time, is what I call a weekly all-in, a TX3. So in this weekly all-in, what we are doing is, once again, mostly focusing on our relationship. It could be other things that are going on in our life as well. But we do three things. We first start with telling our partner something that we appreciate. It could be multiple things. What did I appreciate about you this week? Make sure that you come up with something and acknowledge your partner for something you appreciate about them for this week. The second is what I call do differently. And that is, what could you have done differently this week? And you're going to address whatever. And you can hold your do differently till when you have, for us, it's Sunday, for when you have the TX3 or not. Maybe it's something you need to rehash, but what could you have done differently this week? And then the third is, how can you show me love this week? Once again, that conversation can take place in 15 minutes, but it's another touch point to connect yourself with your partner, to identify things that you both need, that you love and appreciate about each other. And it can help you grow in intimacy.
Okay, so to be clear,
Yes.
what I love and appreciate about you, what could be maybe done differently this week,
Right.
and how can you show me love?
Right. And we each do it for each other. Yes.
Okay. Now, do you guys do the first question and then share, and then the second question and then share, or you go first and then he goes first?
I go first, or either or. We just pick who wants to go first this week.
Okay.
One person goes first and goes through their whole. Now, sometimes we end up getting in a discussion over usually it's a do differently, not the appreciation. It's nice to just hear somebody appreciate all the things. And it feels good to know that, oh, they saw that. Oh, they recognize that. It feels really good. So the do differently, sometimes it becomes a conversation. If it's something that happened and then you've got to talk it out. And then how can you show me love this week? usually not much of a conversation unless the person just needs to clarify. Like, okay, I want to make sure that this is what you need me to do.
Right. So I love the business meeting idea. I think that's key because my husband and I will go on a walk every morning together. And then we also have breakfast every morning together as well. That's really like our quality time. And we do it first thing in the morning before anything has hit the fan or before any emails are opened and anyone's upset us or we had a really stressful day. So we spend that really great quality time. But what ends up happening is like on the walk, we'll end up talking about business or we'll end up talking about something which gets like stressful or it gets sideways. And so, and then it's like, we're working on wills and working on stuff and it's like business stuff, but it's like now we're in the car coming back from tennis and we're talking about business. And I'm like, it'd be really great if we just had a business meeting every single week with each other.
Exactly.
And we hash out all the things that we need to talk about. We handle all the things because we own a couple different businesses. So different businesses are popping up all day, every day. And it can change the dynamics of the relationship or how dinner was going to go, right? Or if we wanted to have intimacy. Now there's not going to be any intimacy. So I love doing that. We found based on what had happened in our marriage when we didn't value quality time together. I think too, like for me, like quality time was like just being in the same house, being on the same couch, not necessarily having conversation, not necessarily engaged with the partner, So I think that's super, super important to get to know them. And I do know like a lot of parents, they don't have hobbies. They don't have a life. Their only life are their children. So when they are going out to dinner, they really don't have anything to talk about other than the kids. So talk about the importance of creating your own life or your own hobby or something. So when you come to the table for that date night, you have something to share and to talk about or bring to the table.
Right. Yeah. It's so easy to lose ourselves in motherhood, especially when we're working at the same time. And even if we're not, it's just very easy to lose ourselves in motherhood. And it's actually biologically necessary, but I don't think for the period of time that we do in this Western world, because those first couple of years we've got to like keep this kid alive, and it makes sense that, and even hormonally, it makes sense that we kind of neglect to, if that's the word we want to use, I guess I'm using it, to pour everything into our children. But in this isolated society, we're like the only people raising our children. Historically, children were being raised, in community, and it wasn't just the mom solely focused on this child. And so we lose ourselves for way longer than we are even biologically wired to do. And it's not good for us. It's not. And I often have women coming into my practice and they're like, I don't even know who I am. Like, I don't know what I like. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm just lost, especially when the kids get to a certain age and don't need them as much. And so I implore every woman to start to figure that out early, not when your children have flown the nest, not when you get to a point of completely losing yourself, to start to think back to some of those things that you enjoyed when you were a kid. What made you happy? Did you like to read? Did you like to paint? Did you like to, did you have a lemonade stand? Did you like to, were you a little entrepreneur? Whatever it was, often there's still seeds of that in you that you could be interested in. And it may feel selfish in the midst of your very busy life to start to cultivate doing things that you actually like for yourself. But I say it's actually necessary. It's not an option if you want to have a healthy life and relationship and model for your children. Because, what we women do without realizing it is that we model for our daughters that they're supposed to lose themselves at a certain age. And I don't know that that's really what we want to do for them.
And I find it's just, once again, running. Or if you don't have the friends or you don't have the community, you're not really being encouraged to go and spend time with them. You're just hiding at home by yourself and isolating yourself as well. I think some moms, just some that I've come across, is that they have fear. They have fear that no one's going to take care of the kid. They have fear that something's going to happen to the kid. They have fear that the husband doesn't know what to do or feed them.
Yeah. Yes.
Or they fear that wherever they're going, they're not going to fit in, or, they're not going to like it. And I wish I could just wave a spell and just remove all that fear and encourage them to get out there. And some of them are just, they want their kids too. I think sometimes being too dependent on them, where I'm like, oh my God, it's 3 hours, maybe 2 hours, maybe just 1 hour to yourself. Your child is going to be fine. Like at the end of the day, I don't think a kid is going to die in an hour because they stayed with their father or with a relative. Just tell the relative not to feed them for the hour, right? So is there anything that you could add to that would encourage them to get out of their way
Mhm.
Take ownership and go.
I think the other thing is guilt. It's this, especially for working moms, because it's like, well, I spend so much time at work. And so I want to make sure that every hour that I'm not working, that I'm pouring into my children. And it goes back to what I said before. Our children need healthy, happy moms. That's the most important. It's not beneficial to them to have worn out, burned out, frustrated moms who are just trying to be there every second. And so, of course, I'm not encouraging you to not spend time with your child. What I'm encouraging you is to remember that you have to spend time with yourself first so that you are the best version of yourself when you spend with your child. And I know women hear this over and over again, and sometimes it just doesn't always penetrate until they get to a place of rock bottom. And then they've got to take, once again, more time to try to just recoup when things have started to fall apart. And what we know is that maintenance takes a less amount of time and it's necessary. You are not superhuman. And so you are not the one person in the world who doesn't need the maintenance and the self-care. And just like we take care of our children and encourage them to do so, we have to do for ourselves.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Like, I just want to encourage all the women listening today and men, if you are, the stay-home mom or the stay-home dad,
Yes.
to take advantage and ask for help. Encourage others to lead in and go and do something for yourself. My whole first chapter of my book is all about this.
Well, that's great.
So I
love
don't
it.
have any children, but I have a business and it was my baby and it took all of my time, energy, money,
Mm,
just so much of me. And I forgot who I was. I didn't even know who I was. I was like,
yes.
who am I other than
Right.
just my company? And so I went on a self-discovery journey as well. And it just led to so many beautiful places. And I'm just so grateful for the journey. There was a lot of heartache and pain. And I had another woman on my podcast a couple weeks ago, and she was like, I thought I had it all. And she's like, and then I didn't because I wasn't happy. Didn't
Right.
matter. I had the house that I always dreamed of. I had the 3 kids I talked about. I drove the SUV because I did not want to drive a minivan. She goes, I had it all and I still wasn't happy. So she like blew it all up and everything else like that. So she talks about
I love
like
that.
create that time for yourself so you don't want to blow up your life.
Yes, yes. And sometimes you have to blow up your life. But if you work on the maintenance, if you work on the self-care, it's less likely that you'll have to do that.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Zoe, I'm just amazed by you. You're absolutely beautiful as well. If anyone's
Thank
watching the
you.
videos, you can see how beautiful she is.
Oh, thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing your story with us. I'm really grateful to have you on the podcast today. If you could encourage any of our listeners to do something today for themselves that could create the change that they want to see, what would it be?
The first thing I would say is just take 15 minutes. I know it might feel like it's too much to take an hour or a half a day or a day. Just take 15 minutes at the top of your day, every single day, to do something for yourself. And I say the top of the day because the day gets away from you. It gets too busy and you're not going to find time. So you do it in the beginning. I call it kind of tithing that first 10, 15% of the day to ourselves. The second thing is I want you to remember that you cannot change anyone else. You can only change yourself. And often we're in relationships and we're working so hard to fix and change other people. When you work on yourself and when you change yourself, the physics of the relationship demands that the relationship itself will change. So focus on yourself. Focus on fixing the things that you need to fix on. Focus on caring for yourself, and the ripple effect will happen in all of your relationships.
That's beautiful. 100% agree with that. Okay, so if people want to connect with you, because I'm sure everyone's going to be like looking your name up now and saying, how do I get in touch with her? How do I get her book? How do I follow her podcast? Can you please share all of your goodness with us, please?
Absolutely, yes. So I'm at all the socials at Dr. Zoe Shaw, DrZoeShaw. My website is also Dr. Zoe Shaw. You can get my book. You can find it on my website. The newest one is called Stronger in the Difficult Places, which is, I think the subtitle is Untangling or Healing Your Relationship with Yourself by Untangling Complex Shame. And so it's a book about my story, but also mostly about the complex shame journey and how you can untangle it for yourself. So you can find that on Amazon. You can find it on my website as well. And I have a podcast in the same name, Stronger in the Difficult Places.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to definitely be checking out those and sharing that with all of our listeners in my emails and with social as well. Dr. Zoe, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to all the listeners for tuning in. If you connected with this episode, please consider sending this to 5 of your friends. They may know someone that can benefit from Zoe's story and the advice that she shared with us today. If you feel like giving us a review, we'd greatly appreciate one of those too. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning into the Stroke It podcast. I hope you were inspired. I hope you're willing and ready to take some action. I want to encourage you to consider 5 people that could benefit from today's podcast. Super simple to share this episode. You never know who could benefit from hearing this podcast and how you could inspire them to create the change in the life that they're wanting. Cheers, and thank you so much for tuning in. Also, consider giving a review.